Hello, and welcome to the British Cartographic Society's Teatime Talk series. This series aims to offer a broad and wide range of short talks on topics that will be of interest to the community. Today we have the pleasure of having a talk from John Peaty, the convener of the Historical Military Mapping Group in the British Cartographic Society. John serves on the Council of the Society for Army Historical Research and is responsible for its Templar Medal Book Prize. He was the International Secretary for the British Commission for Military History. He serves on the committee of the Royal Engineers Historical Society, is a founder member of the Royal Air Force Historical Society, and a life member of the Institute of Historical Research. His talk is titled The Waterloo Campaign, The Mapping Perspective, and will explore the contemporary maps available to Wellington, his allies and opponents during the campaign. In particular, it will examine the accuracy and how they either helped or hindered the commanders at the time. It will discuss the famous and controversial Waterloo Map, a prized possession of the Royal Engineers. It will also discuss the examples of where it is possible either inadequate maps or inadequate map reading had an impact on the course and result of the campaign.
In this talk, I will discuss the contemporary maps available during the Waterloo campaign. In particular, I will look at their accuracy and how they helped or hindered the commanders at the time. A famous incident testifies to the fact that Wellington had a good understanding of that part of Belgium over which the campaign was fought. When definite news reached Wellington of the direction of Napoleon's march while he was at the Duchess of Richmond's ball, he asked the Duke of Richmond for a map. The two withdrew to an adjoining room. Wellington closed the door and said with an oath, "Napoleon has humbugged me." He then explained that he had ordered his army to concentrate at Quatre Bras, adding, "But we shall not stop him there, and if so, I must fight him here," marking Waterloo with his thumbnail on the map as he spoke. That is precisely what happened. After checking Ney at the crossroads of Quatre Bras and hearing that Blucher's Prussians had been defeated at Ligny to the east, Wellington withdrew northwards up the main road to the vicinity of the town of Waterloo in order to defend Brussels. Wellington chose a good position to resist Napoleon. He deployed his troops along a low ridge just south of the village of Mont-Saint-Jean, rising to 125 metres above sea level, within gently undulating countryside in which relief seldom varies by more than a few tens of metres. This gave him the advantage of relatively high ground with its visibility over the battlefield, greater artillery range and ease for infantry and cavalry of charging downslope rather than upslope, as well as the opportunity for sheltering on the reverse slope from direct cannon fire. Most of Wellington's troops were positioned along or behind the crest of the ridge. The ridge carried a track east-northeast towards the town of Wavre, from which direction he had been promised support by Blucher. So how did Wellington know about the crossroads of Quatre Bras and the ridge of Mont-Saint-Jean? How was he able to deploy his forces to the first and then redeploy them to the second? One answer that has been given is the Waterloo Map. This is a prized possession of the Royal Engineers and has pride of place in their museum at Chatham. Does it live up to its reputation? The map covers a large part of Belgium and shows the positions of towns and villages, roads, rivers, major areas of woodland, and most obviously, when viewed from a distance, the relief, indicated artistically and not scientifically by hill shading and not contour lines. The Waterloo area is but a small part of the map and is not shown in detail. Undulations in the ground are poorly depicted. Named localities include the village of Mont Saint Jean, the farmhouse of La Haye Sainte, garrisoned by Wellington and stoutly held for most of the day, and the alehouse of La Belle Alliance, used by Napoleon as his HQ before the battle. These all lie along the main road. The chateau of Gaumont, also garrisoned by Wellington and stoutly held throughout the day, is also named, lying to the west of the road. The spelling Hougoumont is now more popular. We know relatively little for certain about the Waterloo map. Attached to the map is a note. This plan consists of reconnoitring sketches of the position of Waterloo and the adjacent country, made by order of Lieutenant Colonel Carmichael Smith, commanding Royal Engineer in the Netherlands, by his officers in the years 1814-15. One fair copy had been given to HRH the Prince of Orange, when commander of the forces. The second was ordered by His Grace the Duke of Wellington, but not being in a sufficient state of forwardness, this original plan was sent to the field when called for by His Grace on 16th of June 1815. It was in custody of Lieutenant Waters, RE, lost and recovered in a melee with the French cavalry at Quatre Bras. On the 17th, upon the Duke deciding upon retiring on Waterloo, His Grace called on the commanding engineer for the plan, who took it from Brigade Major Oldfield Royal Engineers, to whom the custody had been transferred on his joining headquarters and given to the Duke, by whom it was handed to his Quartermaster General, Lieutenant Colonel Sir William Delancey, KCB, with directions to place the troops in position. Orders being at the same time given to Lieutenant Colonel Carmichael Smith relative to his own department. This plan was on the person of Sir William Delancey when that officer was killed. It was recovered for Lieutenant Colonel Carmichael Smith by Brigade Major Oldfield from Lieutenant Colonel Sir Charles V. Brooke, DQM General, at Le Cateau Cambrésis on the advance upon Paris in June 1815, since which time it has been with the papers of Lieutenant Colonel Sir James Carmichael Smith, Baronet, CB, KCH, KMJ, KSN. The note is signed J. Oldfield, Colonel, Royal Engineers, 31st of January, 1846. The map is a combination of 10 different pieces of paper which were surveyed separately, as was usual at the time, in the year which preceded the battle. The pieces of the map were drawn by a team of 10 Royal Engineer officers whose task was to survey areas and fortifications in the Netherlands and on the French borderlands. This task was not a priority at the time and only became so after Napoleon's return to power. The sections of the map were drawn using different qualities of paper and detail. The part of the map that is of the highest quality is the area west of Hull in the northwest. This area has a greater level of detail, including more hill shading and tree lining. This area was revised at request of Wellington by Captain Spurling in May 1815. The emphasis on this section of the map and Wellington's concern with the area of Hull, for which he has been criticised by some, is because a good paved road led from the French border through Hull to Brussels. The section of poorest quality, supposedly completed at the last moment, is the area in the centre of the north portion of the map. This was drawn on inferior brown paper and is less detailed. Although it is in a regular shape, the map's overall dimensions are 135 by 99 centimetres. The shape is due to the fact that the 10 different sketches were not redrawn onto a new rectangular sheet. The map covers an area of 120 square miles. It embraces Hull in the northwest, Genappe in the southeast corner, Nivelles in the south centre, and the area where the battle was fought in the northeast. Its scale is approximately 4 inches to the mile. or 1 to 253,440. Given its lack of detail and its scale, the map is obviously not suitable as a tactical map for fighting a battle. However, it was suitable as an operational map for fighting a campaign, depicting relief and roads. In particular, it showed clearly that most of the good roads radiated from Brussels, that there were few lateral roads, and that crossroads, such as Quatre Bras, were therefore of importance. In the days that preceded the Battle of Waterloo, the several pieces of the map were united in some haste for use by Wellington. On the 15th of June, Napoleon's forces were on the move and he had stolen a march on Wellington and Blucher. Wellington needed to decide how to counter Napoleon, and on the 16th, the map was called for. A fair copy of the map had previously been made, but this had already been presented to the Prince of Orange. Wellington's copy was not yet finished. Due to time constraints, it was decided that the original sketches would be used. Walters is believed to have received the individual sketches from the RE officers via Oldfield. The map was nearly lost during his possession of it when he became involved in a melee at the Battle of Quatre Bras. Walters became unhorsed during an assault by French cavalry and then spent the rest of the battle trying to evade capture. His horse had bolted, but luckily Walters was able to locate it shortly after. According to Oldfield, he was delighted to find his horse quietly destroying the vegetables in a garden near the farmhouse at Quatre Bras. Walters then resumed his journey and delivered the sketches to Wellington's HQ in Brussels, where it was pieced together. There was no time to redraw the different sections, so the pieces were pasted together with overlaps and backed onto canvas material. It was then passed to Wellington via Oldfield and Carmichael Smith. At this point, Wellington is reported to have made his mark on the map by drawing pencil lines to reflect troop positions. He then handed it to Delancey, who made arrangements accordingly. The purpose of the pencil lines is disputed, and there are two schools of thought. The first is that Wellington made the marks to indicate his intended troop positions to Delancey. The second is that the marks were made for the benefit of a Prussian military liaison officer to indicate to the Prussians where his line would be and where he wished them to arrive. At the battle itself, Delancey carried the map on his person, reportedly in his jacket pocket. He was mortally wounded by a cannonball which hit him in the back. Wellington was very close by when this happened, and in his account of the battle reports Delancey's last words, "Pray let them tell them to leave me and let me die in peace." Delancey's newly married wife was brought from Brussels to nurse him for several days before he succumbed to his wounds. After Delancey had fallen, the map was recovered by Oldfield and then passed it back to Carmichael Smith. For many years, it was suggested that the dark area at the top of the map was the stain of Delancey's blood, a story popularised by Sir Walter Scott. However, modern science has shown it to be the result of a 19th century attempt at conserving the map. A copy of the map was made in 1846, often referred to as the Plymouth Map, and this is now held by the British Library. In the same year, Oldfield added an explanatory note to the left of the map, which I quoted above. The map is drawn in iron gall ink, black ink, graphite pencil, grey wash, green wash, and red pigment. It is backed on paper, which in turn has been backed on linen. The map shows signs of abrasion. The wrinkles date from the time it was originally assembled. For the Waterloo Bicentenary in June 2015, the museum redisplayed the map in a way which highlighted its significance, but also protected it from deterioration. In addition to the Waterloo map, Wellington possessed copies of the Ferraris maps. It is not known to what extent he used the Ferraris maps or to what extent they influenced the survey work undertaken for the Waterloo map. British soldiers, and sappers in particular, have a history of distrusting native mapping, but some use and influence would have been inevitable. Between 1771 and 1778, Joseph de Ferraris produced a secret series of maps of the then Austrian Netherlands for the Habsburgs. The maps were made on the scale of 1 to 11,250 and formed a collection of 275 manuscript and hand-coloured maps, 0.9 by 1.4 metres each. These were accompanied by 12 volumes of handwritten commentaries relating to topics of economic and military interest: rivers, bridges, forests, possibilities for military camps. 3 original sets of these manuscript maps remain in Vienna, in The Hague, and in Brussels. They are works of art. They include sheet 61 Howell, 76 Brussels, 79 Nivelles, 81 Charleroi, 95 Wavre, 97 Jean Bleu, 98 Fleurus, covering the campaign area. In 77 and 78, Ferraris produced a version for public sale. 25 maps printed at the smaller scale of 1 to 86,400, which of course is not a tactical scale. The Ferraris maps were much used during the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. When the French invaded in 1792-3, they took 400 copies of the map from a Brussels printer and seller. In 1794, they took the engraving plates to France so they could produce more maps for their own use and to prevent anyone else from acquiring copies. Louis Capitaine, a French engineer, copied it and in 1797 produced 2 versions, a secret one with 69 sheets and a smaller scale version on 6 sheets, which was sold to the public. Capitaine's main concern was to rearrange the maps so that they formed a unity with the maps of France by Cassini in order to portray the southern Netherlands as an integral part of France. He made only a few and minor revisions to what was on the maps. During the campaign, Wellington had a copy of the 6-sheet version. It's believed that Blucher also had a copy of the 6-sheet version. Napoleon carried a copy of the Capitaine maps, of which sheets 11 to 18 covered the campaign area, while his aide carried a copy of the Ferraris maps. Whichever the version used, apart from a handful of updatings and corrections, the information basically dated from the 1770s. To give 2 examples, coal mines with their supporting infrastructure had been developed around Charleroi by 1815. Quatre Bras was shown as Trois Bras. Considering that Napoleon was well aware of the dangers of inadequate maps in his campaigns, it is surprising that he fought the Wellington campaign with maps which were both outdated and lacking in detail. Napoleon made use of a topographical map when planning his campaign and of his topographical expert, General Bernard, during it. Indeed, he spent much of the day of Waterloo observing the battle at a table with the map spread out on it. Nevertheless, old maps with inadequate detail were used during the campaign by all sides. I will give 3 examples where I think either inadequate maps and/or inadequate map reading had an impact on the course and result of the campaign. The First Corps of d'Erlon was ordered by Napoleon to march from Quatre Bras towards the Battle of Ligny to help, but this corps never arrived at the right spot. d'Erlon had been ordered to march to a Belgian village with an unpronounceable name beginning with W, but he marched his men to another village with an unpronounceable name beginning with W, 5 miles further to the south. The arrival of a large body of men, not on the Prussian flank as Napoleon had intended, but in the French rear, served both to upset Napoleon's plans and give a breathing space to Blucher. If two locations with similar names had not been confused, Blucher could have been defeated more quickly and more utterly at Ligny than he in fact was. The cause of this confusion remains unclear. Were the orders illegible because of bad handwriting? Was d'Erlon not good at map reading? What is clear is that d'Erlon spent the day marching between the two battlefields without his men firing a shot at either. Blucher's Prussians were heavily defeated at Ligny, but their fierce resistance plus the d'Erlon debacle meant that they were not routed, that their retreat was covered by night, and that they lived to fight another day. They fell back to the north, to Wavre, although their lines of communication extended eastwards towards Namur. It has been argued that the Prussians took this rather surprising decision because Wavre was the only name they could read on their map by the light of candles when they were withdrawing from Ligny. An area on the Ferraris Capitaine map caused some confusion in the French army. The road leading to Wellington centre was drawn at the east side of the farm of Mont Saint-Jean, while in reality it is on the west side. The same road passes on the east side of the farm of La Haye-Sainte, as was correctly drawn on the map. It has been argued that because of this error, Napoleon and his staff mixed up the two locations at the beginning of the battle. To conclude this brief talk, all the mapping available to all the sides in the campaign was inadequate. The various versions of the Ferraris maps available were used by all the combatants, including the Capitaine versions used by Napoleon, were outdated and lacking in detail. In addition to the Ferraris maps, Wellington had the Waterloo Map. Though it was of smaller scale and less detailed than the Ferraris maps, it was much more current. So current, in fact, that it was unfinished. Wellington's forces thus possessed a composite map of the theatre of operations, which had been surveyed recently and which emphasised relief and roads, plus the Ferraris maps. While Napoleon's forces possessed the Ferraris maps and the Capitaine maps derived from them, both seriously outdated. I believe that Wellington's knowledge of the theatre of operations and of the battlefields of Quatre Bras and Waterloo was superior to that of Napoleon because his mapping and his use of it were better, enabling him to read and use the ground to advantage. Along with Napoleon's arrogance, poor staff work, inadequate subordinate commanders, and the inclement weather, which are often cited, I believe that Wellington's superior knowledge of the ground and better use of it may fairly be said to be another reason for his famous and improbable victory over Napoleon at Waterloo.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I want to thank John for a very interesting talk, and I hope that you will join us for future talks in the series. Goodbye.